relevant.
Because you go to a Catholic church, don't you? Or you've attended recently. You're interested in Catholicism, aren't you?
Sure.
All right. Are you familiar with their doctrines?
Somewhat.
Okay, you're
Their
familiar.
doctrines are very
how do they
deep.
regard Mary?
Why are you asking me that?
Because you're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
and I mean
either you're a
'cause I
Christian
won't
or you're
talk
not.
to you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
If you watched my last video, What Happened to Matt, then this one is going to feel familiar because today we're asking the same question, but about someone very different, Jordan Peterson. If I had to point to one person who represents this modern movement of defending unprovable beliefs, it would be him. And I used to listen to him. And at the time, it felt like he was saying something deeper. But then I watched one debate, the debate that put old school Matt against this modern defender of Christianity. Hello humans, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, this is the place where we slow things down and take a closer look at what people believe and why they believe it. So as we go through this, close your heart, open your mind, and question your beliefs. But before we jump into the current Jordan Peterson arc, let's go back for a moment. Back to when he had me and a lot of other people convinced he was saying something truly profound. And I want you to listen carefully as we play these clips, because by the end of them, he's going to say something that should make you stop and ask,
what would I have to do? And I would say, start where you can start, fix the things you repeat every day, because people tend to think of those as trivial, right? You get up, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, you have your routines that you go through every day. Well, those probably constitute 50% of your life. And people think, well, they're mundane, I don't need to pay attention to them. It's like, no, that's exactly wrong. The things you do every day, those are the most important things you do. You see what you aim at. I'm not trying to reduce everybody's problems to an improper aim. People get cut off at the knees for all sorts of reasons. They get sick, they have accidents. There's a random element to being, that's for sure. And so you don't want to take anything, even that particular phrase, too far.
Orient yourself towards something. You have to figure out what it is. What will work for you? What goal would justify the suffering of your life? What I've recommended to people is clean up your room. Clean up your room. If you can stop saying things you know to be lies. That's not the same as telling the truth.
Stop saying things that violate your conscience.
Here's another idea. Stop saying and doing things that make you feel weak. All you have to do is pay attention to that. Some things you do will make you feel disintegrated. It's a physiological sensation. Some things improve your integrity and some things disintegrate you. A girl come up to me last night. She said, I started cleaning up my room and it completely changed my life. She said, your room is an externalization of your mind. So straighten up what you can straighten up and quit saying things that make you feel weak. And then you'll know what to do next.
and I want you to notice something about that line.
And you'll know what to do next.
Because to someone who understands the world, that might sound simple, but to someone who doesn't, that sounds like an answer. And I'll be honest, that's where I was. I didn't understand reality yet. So anything that sounded structured felt like an answer. And this is where the problem starts. What he's giving you isn't actually an answer. It's a metaphor. And metaphors are powerful. They help you understand the basics. They point you in a direction. But if you're lost, you don't just need direction. You need something real to hold on to.
Clean up your room.
Sounds amazing because it feels like control. It feels like progress. But what if you don't know what's actually mess in your life? What if you can't tell the difference between something that needs to be removed and something that just needs to be moved? Now, you're not fixing your life. You're just rearranging confusion. So now we're about to move into the Jordan most people recognize today and the debate we're about to watch at the time. This was the clash of the century, and depending on how you see it, this might be where everything started to fall apart. And the reason we're doing this is simple, because it becomes very easy to see whether someone actually has substance behind what they're saying once they're put on a stage and forced to answer questions.
I thought it would be nice if we started with something quick and easy and simple, like God. In particular, I don't believe there is one. And I have no idea what your thoughts are on it.
Well, it's a complicated problem, and I don't think that we take it with due seriousness. I specifically don't think that the celebrity atheist types, who I actually have a fair bit of respect for, by the way, take it with due seriousness. So I don't think that they take it with due seriousness from a biological perspective or a phenomenological perspective or a literary perspective or a metaphoric perspective. That'll do for starters. I've become convinced that the fundamental presuppositions of our very functional cultures, or Western cultures say, are nested immovably in a metaphorical substrate. And that when you enter that metaphorical substrate, you're in the domain of religious phenomenology. And I think that not only can you derive that conclusion as a consequence of deep philosophical thought and literary analysis, but that if you know enough about brain function, you'll also come to the same conclusion. I think you come to the same conclusion as well if you look at the evolution of religious cognition from the perspective of an evolutionary biologist and not from the position of a evolutionary biologist whose head is addled by the belief that most of human morality was established in the 500 years since the Enlightenment.
Seemingly, if I'm understanding it, to religious thought, religious tradition, the value of religious identity to individuals. And I don't see that any of it relates to whether or not there is a God or whether or not there's sufficient reason to believe there's a God.
You just heard that. And this might be the first time he was not allowed to have his rambling be an answer. And it sounds similar to other clips, but slow it down. What was actually said?
Well, it's a complicated problem.
Because the question was simple. What is the evidence that shows that a God exists? And instead of answering that, we get a long explanation that never actually lands anywhere. And then Matt steps in and brings it right back to reality. Not complicated, not abstract, just, did that answer the question?
No.
And this is where you need to pay attention, because this isn't just one moment. This becomes the pattern. When someone can't give a clear answer, they don't stop talking. They replace clarity with complexity. And what you're about to see next makes that pattern even harder to ignore.
God exists. My answer to this so far seems to be no. And the apologists, the theologians, they keep presenting the arguments, the teleological arguments, moral arguments, and all these things. They have nothing to do with the phenomenology of religion. They have nothing to do with how this impacts people's lives. This is a question of, is it in fact the case? Is it consistent with reality that there is a God? And is it consistent with reality that there is good reason to believe there's a God? That is where the focus is primarily.
Yeah, and it's usually construed as a scientific issue.
Well, it's not so. I would never construe it as a scientific issue because science can't confirm the supernatural. I mean, we are blocked until somebody demonstrates a mechanism by which we can explore and confirm the existence of the supernatural and then confirm that it actually can impact the natural world. We're stuck, which is why science relies on methodological naturalism.
You seem to be able to do it with psychedelic drugs.
You seem to be able to do what with psychedelic drugs?
Well, everybody that takes them under reliable settings generally comes back and claims the presence of a mystical experience.
Yeah,
and that seems to be duplicatable and replicable across cultures in labs with multiple different substances, the chemical constituents of which are known very well. It's part of this religious phenomenology. And to me, that's just a set of facts. And we know that people have been using those substances to evoke mystical and religious experiences for, who knows, 150,000 years maybe. Sure. We can at least infer that. And we have no idea whatsoever how much of an effect the use of those substances has had on the metaphysical substrate of our culture. So what constitutes scientific data here is by no means clear. Here's an example of this, for example.
Before the example, yeah. As someone who's been high as a kite, I fully agree that people take drugs and report experiences that they describe as mystical or supernatural. Just like people report other experiences as if they were religious or ghosts or whatever. We have no way of confirming that this something mystical or supernatural actually happened. What this is about the language.
Stops people from smoking.
Well, you can stop smoking without any sort of supernatural intervention.
No, not really.
Now, to be fair, what he is pointing to here is that people across history have had similar experiences, especially when using certain substances. So the idea is, if people keep having similar experiences, maybe those experiences are pointing to something real. But here is the problem. Do repeated experiences automatically mean those experiences are true? Or to be more clear, this is repeatable, but by physically manipulating reality, not something supernatural. And since Matt is ready to call this out, we get the great comeback line.
As someone who's been high as a kite,
This is something we have spoken of before. If the supernatural is real, it would be completely different from the natural, at least in my opinion. Here is your chance. Let me know what you think. Comment below. Also, I try to respond to all comments I see that are directed towards me, so make sure to use @neverflame_nevertilt so you catch my eye.
The psilocybin doesn't directly have an impact on the smoking behavior. It has to elicit what's described subjectively as a mystical experience. And you can get physiological indicators of that mystical experience. And you might say, well, that's not enough to prove that it's a mystical experience, but you're conscious and I accept that. It's like you accept all sorts of things without being able to demonstrate their validity on every possible objective, with every possible objective criteria.
Now, we do believe things we cannot prove at every level. But here's the problem. The things we put in that category still have some evidence behind them. With the supernatural, we have zero.
So don't get in too much of a hurry. It's a serious issue. If you give people psilocybin, for example, and they have a mystical experience, not only are they much more likely to quit smoking, which is really something, but they're also much less likely to suffer from death anxiety if they have cancer. Like, that's quite the thing. And not only that, if you test them a year later and they've had a mystical experience, which the majority of them regard as the most significant one, two, or three experiences of their life, including such things as getting married, their personalities are permanently altered in the direction of more openness to experience and more creativity by a standard deviation. Like, that's walloping effects. So we can't get too much in a hurry about dispensing with all that.
Skepticism, as I repeatedly point out in the show, is not about cynicism. It's not about debunking. And I'm not saying that there is no supernatural and that there is no mystical experience. What I'm saying is, the thing that people subjectively describe as, I had an incredibly impactful mystical experience, whether it comes from taking a pharmaceutical, whether it comes from attending a revival church service or hearing a particular preacher, whether it comes from having a particularly impressive sexual experience, all of those things, that is the subjective description of that, which may be because of limitations in language, that they don't have any other. This is the language that infuses culture, so that we have to use that to describe it. But that doesn't in any way serve to confirm that there is any sort of supernatural realm or any sort of supernatural actor.
Well, it depends on how you define supernatural.
And right there,
Define supernatural.
this is another example of what we have been seeing the entire time. When the question gets too direct, the answer shifts, because at the end of the day, there is still no actual substance behind the claim. In fact, his perception of reality becomes so malleable that it allows him to move the meaning of things instead of answering the question. So instead of answering the question itself gets redefined. And when that happens, you are no longer looking for truth, you are avoiding it. Because,
Well, it's a complicated problem.
Belief is the state of being convinced that a proposition is true or likely true. It's everything that I try to do, I tend to view in the form of propositional reasoning. So when we talk about the narrative,
Yeah, that's a problem, by the way.
okay,
Yeah, well, you can't reduce the world to a set of propositions.
why not?
Oh, look,
Show me something that is
No
true
problem,
in
man.
the world that is not a proposition. That
like an
you cannot
explicit,
put in the
statable proposition.
something that is demonstrably true that I could not put in a proposition.
Oh, that's easy. You
Okay.
sure you want to go there?
I'm not afraid of anything.
Okay, okay.
If I'm wrong, I want to know I'm wrong. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to, for years, I had this thing going where people would say, oh, and this is kind of what we're getting at from a different angle. I would say they would be afraid of what we would lose if we lost religion. And I basically said, demonstrate to me any benefit.
Oh, you'd lose art and poetry and drama and narrative
Why?
and story.
Are there no godless artists and poets?
Well, there are artists and poets who think they're godless.
And there it is.
Artists and poets who think they're godless.
One more time for all to see. This is what happens when someone is not allowed to just say things that sound meaningful, but is forced to actually answer. Every clip we watched led to this. The shifting definitions, the abstract answers, the appeal to experience, all of it builds to this moment. When the claim cannot be supported, it doesn't get defended, it gets redefined. And when even the definition of an atheist has to be changed just to protect the idea, that's when you know something broke. And if you think back to the very beginning of this video, all of this started with a simple question. Are you a Christian or not?
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
And after everything we just watched, even then, he still could not give a clear answer. And it's not because the question was complicated, it's because answering it would require something solid. What we saw today was not just a debate. It was what happens when ideas are built on things that cannot be tested, cannot be measured, cannot be clearly defined, and cannot be demonstrated. At one point, Jordan was able to get away with this. And after this debate, it seemed to go downhill from there. So that's it. Let me know what you think. Did I get it wrong? Do you think Jordan did well? Let me know below. I look forward to the conversation. As always, I am Jay. Don't forget to question your beliefs.